let's talk about the fact in the paper that you quit like right before this happened. Was this a conspiracy? Did you set this up? Did you know this was going to happen? we should talk about that.
The most orthodox of all Marxist economists I have ever met.
The reason why I'm still a Marxist is that I claim that this structure of belief, of displaced belief, you find it in what Marx described as commodity fetishism.
That all really dialectical and intelligent human beings will have a sense for evil and some sympathy for the devil, or they will be just a little stifled in horror. I think that's not wrong. Just a little sympathy for the devil will hurt.
Inside Critical Theory brings you this Diet Soap interview. You announced on Twitter that we were going to be talking about anti-politics.
Yeah, because that's what you told me we were going to be talking about.
Okay, then that's what we'll talk about. There's a, I'm sort of running around a lot these days, trying to keep a lot of things going up. Trying to bring the publishing part of this together.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with, I finally settled all the background legal issues. That's settled unless something changes. I don't think that it will. I'm watching the Patreon like a hawk, but getting a lot of support there. Yeah, so it's a weird transitional moment. There's someone on Twitter who has taken my picture and my name and is imitating me, sort of, not really imitating me. Let me give you an example of the kind of thing that they're saying. Tweeting out under my name. This is by someone on Twitter. His name is Doug Lane at zerobookspublishing.com. On November 30th. They say the OnlyFans women I follow on here are definitely going to have sexy with me. Just a matter of when and where, really.
Okay, like this. Not okay. That's not even political parody. I don't know what that is.
I'm not sure exactly. I guess I come off like a middle-aged incel or some shit. I don't know exactly how people interpret me, but I have sexy all the time. I don't need to wait for the OnlyFans women. I just want to say that outright. Because saying that outright will certainly discourage someone like this from making these kinds of tweets. All right. So all that is now cut, and we'll start from here. Hello, Derick. How are you doing today? I'm glad to have you back on the channel.
Nice to be back on a Diet Soap. I guess this is the first time I'm on a Diet Soap channel, but yeah.
Yeah, you were a regular guest on the Diet Soap podcast. And this is the podcast, really. It's just got a video component as well. I think what we're going to talk about today is sort of the impasse that we've been feeling, I think, for over a year, really.
Yeah.
But that is, for me personally, become rather profound. I'll just say that in the background, I've had conversations with people who are on the left where they've expressed to me, not just one person, but a couple of different people and very different milieus, expressed to me a feeling that they don't know how to even talk about what's wrong. Because if they start to try to talk about what's wrong, they are either shoved into the culture war or just not heard at all.
Yeah.
And so, like, as an example, it's very difficult to talk about the response to the pandemic in a serious way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's pretty much been relegated to, like, Axios or something like that. I mean, not even NPR seems to be able to talk about it in a serious way. And I think that's been interesting. I listened today to something on your Patreon, which was us at like ground zero of the pandemic, like the first week before we were even sent home here in Utah from the public school. So almost 2 years ago now. And it was wild to think about how much worse the impasse has has gone. And then I flip back to a conversation that you and I had 4 years ago. It was right after Trump got elected, and we were talking about the anti-political move. And I had written a series called, the Death to Wonktopia, which
Mhm.
was talking about how flat-footed the response of conventional Democrats have been, not just to 2015, but really to the entire spectrum of politics, that they had forgotten how they came back into power, even though they won the popular election in 2008, that they had forgotten what it had taken to really shake off that neoconservative yoke. And I was thinking about this today. Joe Biden was always an anemic candidate. Like, it was clear that even the center of the Democratic Party was afraid of a 77-year-old Joe Biden in a way they probably wouldn't have been if he'd have run in 2015. And the coronation there was because there was no one on the backbench other than, not even really Bernie. I don't want to flatter your listeners, actually, by pretending that Bernie was actually super strong either. Well,
let me jump in and say two things.
Mm-hmm.
The death of Wonktopia,
Mm-hmm.
essay you wrote. I mean, I think from a certain perspective now, you were being too optimistic.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. I don't think Wonktopia is at all dead.
Well, but I also don't think it's alive.
Revived it. Huh?
I don't think it's alive either. I mean, this is this weird moment that we live in because of the pandemic. Pandemic has revived the center in a lot of places, even the centers of social democracy. But public opinion has gone against them, mostly cut towards the right, actually.
Well, yeah. Well, let's get to that. But okay. So, but the main thing that I want to say, Wonktopia is the strongest political actor on the scene today. I think it's got the most of the power behind it. And then briefly to address the question of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was never thought of by even his supporters as the candidate that the establishment wanted. It was supposed to be something that happened kind of the way Trump happened. No one, the Republican Party didn't want Trump, but he ended up getting there despite forces against him. So I just want to point out that despite that, clearly the Sanders movement was a failure, but there was a moment there after the first three primaries where Sanders started to look inevitable. And
that's because we can't do math, but sure.
Well, I mean, he wasn't inevitable, but he started to look inevitable.
But yeah, right.
I mean, and a normal candidate, if it hadn't been a Trump-like candidate, if, in other words, a candidate that was not embraced by the establishment, if it had been Michael Dukakis or John Kerry, he would have certainly been inevitable after those three victories, right? So you can't kick the Social Democratic left too hard for their delusions in that very small window after those three primaries. And the defeat that was suffered after that, it was a kick in the guts. It did feel bad to watch that happen. I know it wasn't, I know.
Discrediting of social democracy, though, isn't even really an American phenomenon. Like, this is a worldwide phenomenon where I think we're going to see in all the places that are coming up for elections where the center left was in charge in Europe, they're probably going to lose. And all the places that the center right was in charge, they're also probably going to lose. And the exception to that being the UK, because the strife within the labor movement was so thorough that apparently the leadership of Labour is totally willing to make the post-Brexit UK one-party state, effectively for the immediate future.
Mhm.
I mean, they have no serious response to Boris Johnson, despite the corruption scandals and major flub-ups that, frankly, are even more, if you really study what went on in the UK, are even more embarrassing in some ways than what happened to Trump. The Tories will pay no political price for it. So what have we seen in America? I mean, I was listening today to Standard Normal 538 podcast stuff because
you were listening to 538 particularly, or
I was listening to 538 and I was listening to just normal NPR because every now and then you have to listen to what the normies say, and NPR is also in La La Land right now. We could talk about that later. But 538 was saying that we have seen an uptick in the Republican Party membership and people re-registering as Republicans in the last 6 months, more than we've probably seen in 20 years. They weren't actually even blaming Biden's unpopularity, although that's a large part of it. They were blaming inflation. And I think that when we talk about anti-politics, people like Tad Teza, whose book on anti-politics we've been awaiting on bated breath now for like 4 years. We've seen a lot of them move more and more towards explicitly right-wing talking points and towards seeing the movement of the social, as they would call it, outside of the political spectrum. Ironically, they kind of proved an assertion that Chris Catrone made in 2013-14 correct, that attempts to go outside of politics to revitalize the left would probably over time move right-wing. And you've seen that with a lot of these individuals picking up talking points that from their standpoint of the social don't make a lot of sense. They only make sense if you're picking up talking points that are, broadly speaking, conservative talking points.
Can you give me an example of one of them?
The way they talk about vaccines and mass mandates and whatnot. There are plenty of critiques to be made about how the liberal establishment has handled vaccines, about liberal elites' hypocrisy in mask enforcements and stuff like that. I mean, and there are people making those critiques, frankly. Whether or not they're good faith or bad faith is not for me to decide, and we probably can't know for a while. But what I will say is you start seeing people talk about, pick up anti-vax and anti-mask talking points, particularly mask, because it's a small ask. There was a window where I could have accepted some let's not push masks to get more people vaccinated.
That was my position for a while.
I think that I don't know that I agree with that position, but at least it was a defensible position. What I have found interesting in the emergence of this is we've seen anti-left Marxism emerge. We've seen, which claims to be beyond left and right, but only punches left. We've seen reemergence of like Stalinism. We've seen a reemergence for the third or fourth time of conspiracy mongering, but amongst bigger channels of left-wing media. And I was thinking about it today and I was like, this feels like a deviation, but it's actually kind of a return to a norm of like the aughts, even though a lot of people involved probably barely remember that.
No, it does. I mean, all of that sounds relatively familiar. Okay, so just to address I want to address the anti-vax, anti-mask sentiment, and also talk about what it means to punch right or left right now. But I was on the Alpha Bunga Bunga podcast. I think it was today, and I was discussing the anti-vax position and the opposition to the mandate, to the vaccine mandate, which are not exactly the same thing, but they're similar. And my thinking is that being opposed to the vaccine has become a way for people, mostly on the right, but not only on the right, to express dissatisfaction or opposition to the way COVID was handled overall. It's symbolically like a rejection of the state's authority based on the failure of the state to respond. It's not a rational response, but this is a sentiment behind it, I think. This is what gives it emotional power. But beyond the conspiracy theories and beyond all the rest, it's just sort of this visceral response to the failure of the state to adequately respond. And also it's a denial or rejection of the way responsibility for the impact of the vaccine of the virus has been shifted from state authorities onto the general population and broken up into tribal war. So like the people responsible for the problems created by COVID are the unvaccinated, are the red staters, or the people who maybe don't have college degrees or things like that. So, and I think that the sentiment there would explain why someone like Richard Wolff has opposed the vaccine mandate. I mean, I'm going to talk to him soon about why he took that position. But I think that explains it, or at least explains part of it.
I can talk. I'm going to sound like a centrist wonk almost for a second, and which is funny because how much I hate wonks. Mm-hmm. But the best argument against the vaccine mandate is the amount of efficacy increase it's likely to bring out is like 5%, but it could cost legitimacy for public health way beyond that benefit. Mm-hmm. And so, and also, frankly, you're already seeing OSHA can't enforce it, doesn't really seem to want to enforce it.
It's a very weak, I mean, the requirement is a vaccine mandate on a very small portion of the
it's not small, but it's a sizable minority.
Yeah. Okay. Right. It's not by any means requiring the entire population to be vaccinated, which is what the vaccine mandate name implies. It's what the way that it's rhetorically dealt with, as if it is demanding everyone be vaccinated, when it's really more targeted than that, and
frankly targeted in a way that doesn't make that much sense.
Right? I mean, you don't actually have to get the vaccine. No, according to the terms of the mandate, you can just get tested for COVID every day.
However, the implication is that since people will not be able to get tested for COVID every day because they would have to figure out how to provide their own tests, that it's going to encourage mass layoffs in certain large-scale corporations. And then the knock-on effect was intentional, that it would make people who were not actually affected by it afraid to get the vaccine. I mean, afraid so they get the vaccine. But that's like disastrous public policy in a lot of ways. One, I know people keep on talking about how the federal government has a lot of mandates. When I've actually looked at mandates for vaccinations, most of them have been at a state level. States clearly have the authority to do it. And the federal government clearly has the authority to do it for federal employees. But I'll tell you today, Biden's administration announced they weren't even going to lay off everyone who didn't meet the mandate for the federal employees or fire them yet, that they were going to postpone that to January. And I suspect they're going to just never do it. So what was all this for? There's a way in which, there's a way in which people push back on me because I have said, like, look, I am pro vaccination, but I don't like the way the information has been curtailed. Like, epidemiologists have taken hits for promises they actually didn't make. that it was media, frankly, primarily liberal media, because conservative media was pushing in the other direction, making over promises for a vaccine that we all knew we didn't really know how efficacious it could be because it was pushed out so fast.
Right. Well, there were some good studies that were done early on that showed that it was.
There's a 5 fucking year cycle for this normally for a reason.
I know, but I'm just saying I trusted that the evidence. I mean, I don't think that even the studies that were done early on were necessarily wrong. What was wrong was how
it was communicated.
Well, right, and also how long the vaccine would remain that efficacious.
Well, yeah. And different vaccines have different efficacy levels.
Yeah, like, Johnson & Johnson apparently is piece of shit vaccine. And,
right.
Pfizer's not the top of the line. It was Moderna that did best. And have you gotten your booster yet?
Yes, I have.
I have not yet. I need to go get my booster. I've been vaccinated in May, and I guess it's time.
So all this said, like I've been trying to tell people on the left, have more sympathy for the anti-vax sentiment, but don't give in to it. Don't chase it. Don't.
Right. Yeah.
Don't. I think with Richard Wolff, I'm going to be frank, particularly now. I think Richard Wolff is reading where he thinks the working class is. He looked at the nature of the strikes, what the initial reporting was on that strike wave that the left pretty much completely missed out on.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. What like, is that over now?
Ironically, from what the last round of statistics I saw, is by the time the left was actually onto it, it was already largely beginning to die out. So, like, Striketober didn't really happen, and it was only a slight blip from the normal strike actions that you see, but that actually wasn't true for the prior month. And we also haven't factored in the fact that a lot of places have just had a ton of walkouts, and people just giving up the job.
Yeah, this is something I really want to understand better, because, I mean, how many of these people who are just giving up their jobs are actually going to just end up being permanently unemployed?
I have no idea. And no one else does either. And the one thing I will say, it can't explain the labor shortage or the capital strike or both. I'm actually of the opinion that what we're seeing is actually both a capital strike, which is an attempt to use to exaggerate the lack of labor to keep both prices down, to keep labor prices down. But with inflation, that's going to be impossible. And it's already...
labor shortages don't generally keep prices down. They usually keep the wage, give workers a way to get higher wages, I would think.
Real labor shortages don't. Like, you should read up on capital strikes and the prediction in the 40s, which is the idea that they will claim that employers will claim to need more help than they do, and actually deliberately under schedule and whatnot to create a feeling of a shortage to increase the application pool. Now, there's anecdotal evidence of that in certain fields, but there actually isn't a lot of evidence for it in general. What's the motive?
What is that? How does that benefit? So that way you have more applications coming in, therefore you can fire people more easily and hire someone at a lower wage.
No, it's just you could the appearance of competition would actually lead on a firm level to the ability to continue to undercharge.
Or underpay
underpay existing staff, et cetera, and so forth. Mm-hmm. I don't really think that's what we're seeing, except in very rare instances. Like I said, I've heard anecdotes to people who've like applied to a bunch of jobs who haven't been able to get hired, even though we're supposedly in a labor shortage. And I totally believe that. I'm not saying that those individuals are lying, but what I am saying is you can't deduce a capital strike from that. And what I can also say, concurrently, the right-wing narrative about it, that it's all people who are on the super generous unemployment who aren't working. Well, in my state, we haven't taken unemployment since the beginning of the summer. We're
Yeah, no,
back to,
it's clearly not that. I mean,
so it's clearly, yeah, it's not going away.
well, I think that the double whammy of 2008 and then the pandemic created conditions. This is not backed by any empirical evidence, but my thought, something that I think we should investigate, is that it created conditions where the number of people that are no longer counted on the as employable, that they're no longer seeking work, rose markedly, even beyond what had happened in 2008, or people who were maybe on the fringes there became permanently unemployed, and that's how we we've just ended up with labor shortages.
I think some of it is that. I think some of it is childcare. I think some of it is old people leaving there's been a mass boomer retirement that's been largely uncommented on. Between that and the childcare problems, I mean, one of the interesting things is you saw the reversal of the trend of the game in 2008, that lower end skilled but not highly paid female work was one of the few things that was really unscathed during the Great Recession, and thus grew as a proportion of the labor force from 2009 up and through 2019, even to the cost of like teachers and stuff. I mean, we've had a teacher shortage forever, partly because people who would have gone into teaching have gone into things related to servicing hospitals, that sort of work. Well, a lot of those people have childcare. Childcare costs more, and certainly childcare can cost up to $20,000 a year in some places. So it's become it's just an economic calculus for some of those women to leave the market, and some of them don't seem to be coming back. So I think you're right. I mean, I'm actually giving you empirical, the empirical conditions that we can verify that would verify some of what you suspect there. And if someone becomes a housewife, they effectively aren't going to be counted after a while in the unemployment statistics. The other thing I think we just don't know is, I have my suspicions as to what's causing the inflation, and my narrative is different than everybody's. Although I said it a year ago that we'd eventually see inflation, not because even of the super generous Democratic policy. I mean, because even that tax credit for parents, that's what, $300 a month. That's not going to cause inflation. What you're seeing causing this kind of inflation is a mixture of supply chain issues that may not ever go away, or at least might go away in the near term future. And I think actually all this QE that we've been pumping into the market since 2008, it's been kind of eking out slowly before COVID, but it all got jammed up during COVID, and now we're just flooded with asset inflation that's got to go somewhere. And I find it kind of amazing that both left and even actually the populist right has been talking about neoliberalism when it's pretty clear to me that while some elements of trying to force people into compelled markets, part of neoliberalism, is still around and going to be with us for a long time. Even in the Build Back Better plan, if it gets through, and this infrastructure relief, a lot of that stuff was put back in there. But the cores of neoliberalism about non-government intervention and our limited government intervention in the kinds of markets other than setting them up, that's all over, and has really been over since 2009. In the sense that QE has really made all that irrelevant. Since people freaked out about the stock market crashing after 2007, the government has more or less made sure That won't happen no matter what. I think a lot of those chickens are coming home to roost. And this is where this anti-political sentiment really comes in, because people
explain how the connection here between all these economic factors that we've been talking about, and the way people are motivated, are becoming lumpen, and it's getting harder to buy things because of inflation. How does that lead to an anti-political left, for instance?
An anti-political left, well, the leftist is going to check out, because they've been talking about this stuff for years. And the best plan that even the opposition to the DSA on the broad stream left, and I don't mean like the liberal left, but I do mean like people adjacent to it, you look at Jimmy Dore, etc., is the force the vote, so that we'll finally out the neoliberals and the Democratic Party as being illegitimate. And in some ways, that's insulting, because it assumes that people hadn't noticed they were illegitimate before. Like this is the worst the matter with Kansas question. And the real thing is, yes, a year ago, 2 years ago, we saw that, broadly speaking, fairly progressive policies would win even in red states, which means that, okay, now you have to explain, despite their popularities, why are we still fudging around with tax credits? Why are we still fudging around with infrastructure programs? Why are we? Because also everybody knows that Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema, which we should all remind ourselves was like a progressive endorsed by all kinds of people until 2019, was the first openly bisexual senator, was a member of the Green Party, wrote about getting, like, somehow she had a change of heart in the last year and a half. That we've all forgotten where what she was, but and in some ways, she has served as a way for us to forget about how many Democrats, period, have softened or reneged on policies that they have also supported in the past 5 or 6 years. And it was hilarious to me that one of the big things that people, that before they got slaughtered in Virginia, that the Dems were trying to hold out on the infrastructure plan for a carbon tax, which would have been incredibly unpopular unless you also had all this other infrastructure to replace the need for carbon. But if that all is taken out too, and you're dying on the hill of the carbon tax and not the stuff that's going to make it, less progressive and less awful, it looks like you're siding with just the negative end of progressive policy without any promise of the stick. So of course people are just going to tune out. Right. Also, what they hear from left, not just centrist wonks, but from leftist wonks, is that inflation doesn't matter. That inflation, unless it goes above like 11%, really only hurts the rich, even though what they're seeing is the rich being able to buy all these houses and raise rents. And yet even things like food now, and consumer goods, which is what most people measure the inflation index off of, is consumer goods and not things like food and housing and all that, which we've never not seen above 3% on. It's in the last 20 years. Yeah. Is somehow, only hurting the rich because it's making the debt weaker. Well, I hate to tell people about this, but a lot of debt was paid off with those first rounds of COVID checks. And the poor, if they're debt leveraged at such high interest rates that inflation's not going to help that. Not on a way that they're going to notice, but their rent going up, which it has massively, will. So telling them that inflation isn't going to hurt them because, well, it's just going to make your debt less, actually sounds like what you're favoring, even on the left, is like small homeowners and like, you know,
Yeah.
working homeowners,
Middle class.
the middle
Yeah.
class of what we, in liberal terms, the middle class of the working class, like the
Right.
better off of the working class.
Yeah. Okay. But okay. So what I don't understand is actually, because even though I might not have said quite as much as you just did when I was talking about this in the past, I too looked at the quantitative easing and the amount of money that was being pumped into the economy and said, this is eventually going to lead to inflation.
Mhm.
And I spent a while learning just enough about political economy to be able to say why I think that MMT is not an adequate response to the class division and the class struggle, and that's not going to be a solution. And that basically the dream of a statist policy proposal solving the contradictions of capital is utopian in the worst sense. And I've been saying it for a while, those kinds of things, and I'm part of the left. So why do I feel it's such a loss, despite the fact that a lot of what I thought might happen is sort of happening? I guess maybe the reason would be, if I'll answer my own question, it's because despite saying those things in practice, I was tailing the Sanders campaign through it all. I was tailing the Social Democratic left, even as I was criticizing it. I was part of that united front with them, so I made my differences clear, but I continued to support it.
Right.
And now that's gone. It's not even like a worst case scenario is that they would have taken some power and become the enemy in this moment, the way the Biden has, say. That hasn't happened, but they're gone. They're defeated. And so I guess what I'm left with, what you were left with too, even though, you don't want to be there either, is just a moment where you can say, well, I told you so.
Yeah, but that's cold comfort, right? I mean,
right.
I mean, it's in very cold comfort because, like, it's one thing to feel smug on your podcast when the world's not burning. It's another thing when it is, and I don't think, like, I'm not in the look. I'm going to say something. Probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say is, even the breakdown of capitalism, if it has already started and it's not going to be socialism, it's going to be so slow in a lot of ways that we might not even notice it all. Like, and I've been pushing back on people who've told me, well, the riots meant this. I'm like, yeah, but the riots had their a certain character at the beginning. They had a different character by the end in Portland, and under the Biden administration, no one really cares. No, they didn't totally go away, but okay. So then the strike wave happens. Well, we don't seem to be adequately involved in that. We don't know how to help these union workers. Also, people miss this, but the amount of the manufacturing sector that was unionized went up in its proportion to labor because more non-unionized workers got let off, but actually went down in raw numbers during COVID. So the unionized workforce was actually hurt, even though on superficial looking at the percentages, it looked like it grew 1 or 2%. And that's down from only being 11% of manufacturing, which itself is only like something like 12 or 13% of the entire American economy. But that's not just true here. That's the thing. Like, if you look at this on a world scale, these problems are everywhere. And so we're not seeing the left, not just here, but pretty much anywhere, except for maybe in a complicated way, the neo-Maoists and the CC and the CPC made some small headway with the Xi administration in the quote Red New Deal unquote. But if you look at what the Red New Deal actually is, it's a mixture of of but in the West, by the same people who would not accept it here, are highly conservative social policies in regards to sexuality and stuff like that, really strongly being pushed by the CPC, as well as some recognition without formally recognizing people outside of the All Chinese Labor Union, which never recognizes any strike. Some concessions being made to them, and then something like Great Society programs coming out of China. Also crackdowns on their internal tech sector, so they're not just cracking down on Western tech now. They're cracking down on like Weibo, because they started having some of the same problems from the tech sector and internal to China that we have here. And so there's been some gains by neo-Maoist policy, but it's still, from even the standpoint of any socialist program, it would be considered historically quite meager, particularly from a state that doesn't really have political opposition. So what are we seeing as gains right now? Like,
hold on one second. Did the food come?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Varn.
Okay, I'll tell him. Okay, so in about 5-10 minutes, I'm going to take off and we'll go have a dinner, and then we'll do a second half. Is that okay?
Sure, we'll come back and do the pair room.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, well, you've done a lot of talking.
Yeah, I always do a lot of talking.
And but no, I've agreed with everything you've been saying. Okay, so yeah, so social democracy in a way is what's happening in China.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, kind of like, if you finally the communist dream of social democracy has arrived. Like, this is where we're at,
right?
And I mean,
and it's arrived in China, communist China. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it will take off from there. Maybe it will spread from China to the rest of the world in some way. Maybe the Corbyn campaign. But I do think that's the fantasy. I think that's like maybe part of the reason why there's been so much pro-China sentiment from people who are like part of Momentum, part of the Sanders campaign.
Well,
you've
like seen the collapse between social democracy and like soft Stalinism. It's just totally collapsed into each other. And we are in like the Marxist-Leninist moment in some ways, but like to say that is also to be, I mean, it's damning with praise, because to say that we're in their moment is also to say that like, and you've been able to do what exactly? Like stand for a state that you're not living in and bring none of that out to, to any other state in any way meaningful, nor achieve any real gains, or even, I mean, and this I actually think is important, right? Turn the U.S. Propaganda machine against China down, because you know what's done that? Basically, Biden and Xi getting to the table, just and doing real politique, because there is, I think both sides realize, you push this too much, and it becomes dangerous. Particularly right now when there's real fears about climate change. So,
all right. So listen, I want to ask you a question before we sign off on this first half. And if you listen to someone like Chris Catrone at Platypus, one of the things that you start thinking about is how the left is not uniform. It's divided up into kind of parts, right? There's the anti-imperialist left, there's the academic left, there's the activist left. I'm sure I'm forgetting another part of the left.
There's a DSA left, which weirdly though encompasses all of it.
Well, kind of. And there's the social democratic left. So what do you think? Like, where do the podcasters and the publishers and the YouTubers fit? We're not part of the activist left. We're not part of the academic left, really. Some of us might be, but not really. Are we conjoined to anything?
I think it very much depends on the podcaster's aspirations. But what I would say is no. And we are a form of edutainment, and increasingly it's been clear that most of the time it was the tainment part, not the edu part, that stuck. And I feel like it's easy to say, it's easy to come down on the left for this, but just look at the entire political milieu right now. The left that didn't pick up the water for Russiagate, like, okay, the part of the left that didn't do that. Well, then you have the left that did, and then you have the liberals that did, right? I mean, and the liberals actually did so. I think even in the left, it was more sympathetic to Russiagate, far more than the left did. But what was that? Really? It was entertainment. It was politics as football. It amazingly changed, from what I can tell, nothing. Like, and even in so much that some of the stuff, the few things they found out about that, I mean, we're not even going to get into like the Steele dossier or any of that, which
turned out to be, if damning of anyone was damning of, I guess, the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign. I mean,
right.
But I mean, so there was that. And then on the QAnon and all sorts of fake, entertainment is politics, or politics is entertainment, has dominated the right. I mean, there's no question
it totally
about
has.
That.
Right.
But I feel as though the kinds of podcasts, like let's say the Alpha to Omega or Swamp Side, or Zero Books, or now Diet Soap again, that all of that has been different character, where we've been trying to be more critical and be out of didactic. At least that's been my approach.
I'll even give Chapo, like parts of Chapo have tried to be critical and out of didactic. The problem is, like, let's be honest about our problem, is if we push our audience too hard, we lose it. And I'm not saying that like we've never pushed back. I mean, I've told our audience at times literally to go fuck themselves. Right. But I mean, there is a limit to how much you push it. Also, in their defense, we haven't had a coherent answer for what, a social program or a political program to replace this could be. All we've been able to do is say, we have been able to be critical, but that's it. Like, we've been able to say, okay, look, the probability is, from the historical knowledge that we have and what we see right now, this won't work. Like, and here's the reasons. Let's come up with something better. But people don't take that last invitation to help you come up with something better. They hear the first part, they push against it because you're not offering another ready-made solution. And I guess my point is, we never were, like, Marxism historically, and this, I think this is somewhat a fair critique of Marxism sometimes, has been really reticent to say what the answer to the problem is, because we are always afraid that any answer that we give in one time period, even if it's legitimate for that time period, will be taken as an answer for all times. And we just have to look at how many people pick up X historical position of X historical Marxist or socialist group and hold on to it, despite the fact all the conditions that caused X to be instantiated in the first place do not exist now. About the hesitation to do that. But psychologically speaking, like, that's a hard ask. That's a really hard ask. And I think what we tried to do was walk the line between tailing the Social Democrats, who themselves were tailing the Democrats while complaining about them, while also being critical. But you and I both know, particularly up to the Bernie loss, we were holding our tongues. We really were. There were times where we would just be like, well, this Bernie thing, if it happens, we will at least have a new avenue to explore.
But we didn't entirely hold our tongues.
No. But there are times where, like,
well, it was hard for me to stomach my own pessimism.
Well, yeah.
Right. I mean,
And there are times where we were too pessimistic. I actually will say that because, like, for example, if you listen to that first COVID thing, there are times where you're pushing back on me saying that, like, look, they're going to let us all just die. And well,
I was wrong.
I was wrong. I mean, I was wrong partly because I think the Republicans were surprised by the response to their own base.
Wait, so I was pushing back on you, and you were the one saying they're going to let us all die?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And right. And I was saying,
you went on that. You were like, well, eventually. And I was like, well, eventually, but do you have faith in this government? And then you were like, well, no, I don't. And I'm like, we're all going to die. and I was,
but I think I would say something like, well, look, I've looked at the King's College London plan or whatever it was, and it looks like that's going to be implemented. And I don't think that we're gonna, and they're going to try to get some vaccines, and
I mean, well, at that time though, I mean that. And both mine and your defense, that's before the King College London plan was done. That's so early on. I mean, we weren't on lockdown yet. No one even talked about. I
think I read about the King. I think I read that like a week before the lockdown started, or a couple of days before.
Which literally would have been, if you'd read that would have been like the day after we recorded that episode.
Right.
So,
right.
And I was still like freaking out because I was looking at. I was reading talk about the Johnson administration doing the herd immunity model, which could have up to 5 to 10%.
Oh my God, that was a moment there where Johnson looked like a maniac. But okay, look, here's the thing that I want to say, and then I'm gonna run off and I'll come back in about 10-15 minutes. But I think that in the second half of this, in the Parrot Room, we should talk a little bit more about what we did at Zero Books. That we can still talk about that. I can still say the name. I don't think you're gonna sue me for
mentioning that place that we both were contractors for we literally like 7 years.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the path forward. And I feel as though, given how chaotic this transition has been, and the amount of support also that I've received from people, which was surprising, like right away, real support, concrete support, a lot of moral support, people coming over to the Patreon. It's been really terrific. I think that I could easily enough get confused that support meant I had achieved things that I hadn't quite achieved, when I was at Zero Books, and also there. I mean, let's talk about the fact in the Parrot Room that you quit like right before this happened. Was this a conspiracy? Did you set this up? Did you know this was going to happen? We should talk about that.